Hi there, Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional, the creator of SNAP, survivors of narcissistic and abusive personalities. I'm here with two really good friends of mine, Melanie Mize and Michelle Minette, with Family Court Empowerment Coaching. We are going to talk about the cost of fairness. We're talking about family court, what's best for kids, and parental rights, how those aspects come together to create situations where fairness and equality may not be what's best for children. Today, we're going to talk about scheduling and scheduling plans within parenting plans and how those schedules may be good for kids or not so good for kids. But first, let's introduce Melanie and Michelle. Melanie, can you tell us a little bit about what you do to help families and children?
My name is Melanie Mize. I'm a licensed family law attorney. I also serve as a guardian ad litem for children, as a mediator, and also as a parenting coordinator.
Awesome. And Michelle, tell us about yourself and what you do to help families and children.
Hi, yes, I'm a certified holistic life coach and an ABD psychologist, and I run All That wellness coaching, where I help people heal from narcissistic abuse, but also the family court empowerment coaching.
We're going to divide this topic of the cost of fairness into three subtopics. Today, we're talking about scheduling, but future videos will include decision-making and also child support. For today's topic, what I'd really like to hear from you is, can you tell me about what typical schedules are that the family court would offer to families that are going through this system? What are some typical parenting plans that you see?
One of the parenting schedules I think people think of traditionally is something where one parent is primarily with the children, and then the other parent has kind of alternating weekend time from like Friday evening to Sunday evening. And then there might be a weeknight where they have a few hours after school or work through that dinner time and then return to the other parent. What I see more and more of is this shift toward having equal parenting time, where there's a 50-50 schedule. And that comes in a variety of iterations, but most often something called a 2-2-3 plan or a 2-2-5 plan, where the kids are with one parent Monday, Tuesday, then they switch for Wednesday, Thursday, and then the parents are alternating that Friday through Sunday time. And sometimes I see a 50-50 schedule where it's week on, week off, and say there's an exchange maybe every Sunday evening.
Now, Michelle, can you comment on, of those plans that Melanie just mentioned, do any of those remind you of what would be really good for a child or maybe would not be that great for a child?
Yeah, I think it's really tough, right? Because you have to balance out what we know about child development and attachment, but also with what we know about a child's needs for routine, right? And so the younger they are, the more important routine is, but also the more important it is that they see their parents more frequently in order to build attachment. And a lot of these recommended and default and the plans that, Melanie was talking about, the 2-2-3, 2-2-5, those are usually recommended and used for younger children based on attachment and the parents being able to see the child more frequently. But they don't take into consideration that it takes at least a day for a child to adjust to a new environment. And so that whole day is shot, whether it's developing chores, their skills in chores, or doing homework, right? The whole one day back in transition is really just focused on adjusting to the new environment and reconnecting or bonding with the parent-child relationship. So if you got 2 days, you get 1 day, and then the child has to adjust again. And that's really tough.
So you're saying for the 2-2-5, 2-2-3, is that what it is?
Yeah.
That for those plans, that might be something that's better for a small child, a younger child, because then that way they can see both parents more frequently. And developmentally, that might be more appropriate. And it might seem also fair. Is there some fairness in there where we're making sure that there's some equal time between the parents? But one of the factors of schedules that we wanted to talk about has to do with transitions, and how many transitions is healthy for a kid, depending on their age. You mentioned the week on, week off, and that would certainly reduce transitions. But maybe that would be for an older child that doesn't need to see their parent every day or every couple days. But at the same time, doesn't a younger kid also need time to feel safe and established in a new environment?
The thing is, like, you have to weigh it both out, right? And so the courts have been prioritizing, or people have been, I don't know who is, but somebody's been prioritizing attachment within the parent-child relationship between both parents over stability and routine for a child. And I think we need to start asking if that's a mistake. Is the frequent transitioning of the child in order to prioritize attachment to two parents better than securing stability and routine in their daily life, so it's predictable, with a strong attachment, maybe to one parent, and the opportunity to build a relationship with the other?
Beyond just that attachment piece, one of the things that I notice with these frequent transitions is that we wind up with more conflict surrounding the exchange of items. Does the kid have their screen? Does the kid have all the things they need for school? Do they have their soccer cleats or whatever other equipment they need for their extracurricular? Do they have their little security item, their favorite stuffed animal or something like that? These things that go back and forth with the kid during these transitions, a lot of conflict surrounds that when we have more transitions during the week. It's not just the conflict between the parents or just that adjustment that the kid is making to being in the other parent's home. It's the whole thing about the things. So I think a question that then I have, is there a way to balance this idea of the stability and the routine and also the attachment, for attachment to be successful for these parents and the child? Does the child have to have overnight time with both parents in equal measure?
I was reading research, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago, that was starting to lean toward recognizing that a child having a stable home is more important, leads to better measures of success than transitioning between two homes after a divorce, right? But if we're still going to insist on this transitioning the child between two homes, maybe they spend a week with one parent and the other parent gets them after school for dinner a couple nights a week, right? And it happens on the opposite week in the opposite way. But that also opens up questions to extracurricular activities.
Another aspect here in terms of scheduling has to do with holidays. When you are dealing with divorce and trying to reshape and reform a family and your routines and your traditions, there are some routines and traditions that are really important to uphold and maintain. But we're also trying to form new traditions now because things have taken a new shape. Melanie, can you comment on what you see typically in parenting plans in terms of holiday schedules?
Most often I see where the courts or the parents, if they're just, coming to an agreement on the issue, they'll just adopt what the court uses as their standard holiday schedule. And what that is, it's just a list of major holidays throughout the year, including federal holidays and other days of importance like birthdays, for example. So it'll be a list of those. And what it does is it gives begin and end times for each holiday. And then it alternates the years that the parents get the kids and the holiday. So for example, if one parent has Martin Luther King Day one year, the other parent will have President's Day. So they kind of alternate throughout the year. And then the following year, they swap who has which holiday. One of the places I see this become really the biggest issue, and where I see that we're kind of destroying traditions that are important to kids, is when it comes to breaking up things like the Christmas holiday. What we have is a standard plan where one parent will have something like December 23rd through like 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And the other parent will have that 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve through sometime on December 26th or Boxing Day, if you happen to be Canadian or from the UK. I see that as problematic sometimes, because when I'm talking to families, like if I'm doing a guardian ad litem case or mediation case, and I'm talking to parents, I always ask, what do you typically do for holidays? And invariably, they will say something like, we always go to so-and-so's house for Thanksgiving. Then we go to so-and-so's house for Christmas Eve. And then we have Christmas Day dinner with my mom, or, it's something like that, where they've already been alternating. And what we do with these standard holiday schedules is we disrupt that plan. So now they will only go to this one aunt's house on dad's side of the family every other Christmas Eve instead of every Christmas Eve. That's one thing I notice as an issue with the holiday schedules.
And I recently saw actually a woman on TikTok. I wish I could, tag her or reference her, because it was a really brilliant point. But she brought it too, because I know that mine said this, where like the child would alternate Christmas nights, like late Christmas Eve, spend the night with somebody, and then on Christmas Day, midday, have to go to the other parent's house. And so it's like the fairness for parents is that they both get to celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day, right? But what happens with the child is they open up all these cool gifts, and then they have to hurry up and get ready and go to the other parent's house and not get time to play with their toys or anything. And it's not really good quality time for that holiday. So parents being willing to create new traditions at times that don't involve on the holiday, but still honor some of the stability of the rituals that they've practiced in the past is probably a good idea. But it also had me thinking of how when we look at parenting plans for our clients, Melanie, you're really good at paying attention to the times and whether or not they're consistent.
To your prior point, though, it's really that kids just want to play with the toys, and they don't care if they open it up on, the weekend before Christmas or on Christmas Day, as long as they have time to play with it. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, which is a thing that I also bring up to parents when it comes to arguing over who's going to have the kid on their birthday. Because really what your kid wants is they want two different cakes, right? Like they don't care if they have a cake with mom on their actual birthday. If they see mom a couple days later and there's a second cake, that's fantastic. They just won. But as far as exchange times, we try to come up with a routine and stability through these plans. So let's say we've made we're doing our 2-2-5, and the parents are going to exchange on Sunday at 5, and then Tuesday at 5, and then Thursday at 5, or something like that, where we're picking that same time of day. But then when there's a holiday, they vary. They might be 6 o'clock, they might be 7 o'clock. In fact, in Hamilton County, Ohio, where I am predominantly, we just changed up our routine holiday schedule. And it has a lot of days where the pickup will be, so for example, on those Monday holidays, like Martin Luther King Day, the pickup will be Sunday at 6 p.m. and the return will be Monday at 7 p.m. And so we're not even just standardizing those times. And when we're talking about kids, especially kids who are, say, elementary age, or, even in those junior high years, they really thrive on that, having their dinner at the same time right? That nighttime routine, the dinner, the wind down, bath time, bedtime. And when we're changing up the exchange times within a given week, where sometimes it's at 5, sometimes it's at 6, sometimes it's at 7, how's that impacting that kid's just nightly routine?
It presents an opportunity for conflict, which even if you hide it from the kids, they know the parents are fighting, and that's not good for them, right? Yeah. And so the opportunity for conflict, just because Well, I mean, first of all, when you're going through a divorce, you're in fight, flight, or freeze. Who can keep track of anything, right? Like, we're not functioning at our best. Having things consistent, especially at the beginning of this and through the divorce, is going to be helpful. People won't forget, but also if they're in conflict, they're not going to believe the other parent forgot. That's an opportunity for conflict. And, you know, heaven forbid you're going through a high conflict divorce. That gives a high conflict person the opportunity to create chaos, you know, or inconvenience because it's not consistent, and they can just say, oh, oops.
Oh, one thing I'll see is, you know, when you have these exchange times at, let's say it's always at 5 o'clock and then it's a holiday. So now it's at 6 o'clock. The parent time is ending. We'll go ahead and give the kid dinner. So then the kid gets to the other parent's house and they've already eaten, but that other parent has the dinner ready to go because of that exchange time. And so I see that happen a lot, you know, whether it's inadvertent or sometimes I definitely see where that is purposeful.
We're talking about the cost of fairness. We're talking about parenting plans and scheduling. One other aspect would have to do with traveling and vacations. How does the court handle that, or how do parenting plans usually present that kind of time?
I see most often where each parent has something like 2 weeks a year that they could take this extended time where it sort of trumps any of the other time. But there might be rules that it's subject to. So for example, you can't take more than 1 week at a time. So you can't do 2 weeks consecutively, or almost always you can't choose for your extended time to fall over top of someone else's holiday, because the holiday time is the most important in the schedule. Then there are provisions that have to do with, you know, giving notice, giving itineraries, you know, letting the other parent know where you're going, those kind of things. That's what I see most often.
That they have to give a certain amount of notice. Say, for example, the summertime, it would have to fall within, you know, certain months of the year because of school and other issues. Yeah. What if some cool opportunity comes up for this child? What if one parent's resources allow them to do more traveling, would allow the child to have more experiences and to go more places, but the other parent, maybe that's not their situation, that they could take the child on trips and give those experiences. The cost of fairness here could be that by making it equal or fair, we are still limiting the child's ability to fully enjoy their opportunities if one parent would have more resources than the other.
Oh, that could go a variety of ways. And I think a lot of it is dependent on who the parents are and how well they work together, because it could be that one parent has more resources, so they want to do these big, you know, traveling to Italy or going to Japan or whatever it might be. And the other parent doesn't have those financial resources, or maybe doesn't have the time off work. And if you just allot additional extended time to the parent who does have the resources, that might be used in a way to make the other parent kind of not look so good. I could see how that could be used in a variety of ways. And it really just depends on the parents. Because, you know, even if you don't have the time and the financial resources to take more elaborate trips, you can do a lot of what I call adventuring in your own town and really just kind of treat your city as if you're a tourist and seeing different parks. And I was recently speaking with a judge, actually, and she was telling me that when her kids were very young, they made these specific plans to go to every county park that we had and see what that county park had to offer. And that is something that's very low cost. It's very doable, like on a Saturday or something when people are off work and school. And so there's a lot you can do right here without needing to really even use that extended time and utilize those types of resources.
I hear in you, right? Like I can hear a parent saying, well, they're getting in the way of these awesome opportunities and these elaborate experiences and the opportunity to do this and that, because they're limiting, you know, the amount of vacation time I can take, or they're standing in the way of it. But also, we got to be careful of running up against that whole Disneyland daddy, marry mommy problem as well. Children thrive under stability, and it is our job as parents to provide structure that gives them a realistic experience of development as they mature toward adulthood. It's not realistic to go on holiday all the time, right? And as awesome as those are, I tend to lean more towards stability in the home with structure, with chores, with friends, spending that quality time cooking dinners together, checking out the local parks, right? That's where their life is.
And is that extended travel interfering with the relationship or the attachment with the parent that's left at home? A lot of times in parenting plans, I'll see these provisions where it says, parents are going to get 2 or 3 weeks a year, something like that. They can only take 1 week at a time. And then once the kid reaches a certain age, maybe they can do 2 consecutive weeks. And so I think what the court has really been honing in on there is having that frequent and continuing contact with the parent that's at home. And I think, Michelle, you and I talked about this recently in terms of having a vacation with a parent butt up against a kid's sleepaway camp during the summer, and how the time that you're spending away from one parent or not with your parents at all, in the case of this sleepaway camp, how there are some drawbacks there with regard to the parent-child relationship.
I want to expand on that too, right? Because the reason that this Disneyland Daddy, Mary Martin, the main reason that is a problem is because, and the reason we have child support the way that it is because unfortunately, a child's opportunities, their financial opportunities, are linked to attachment, and they can be used to undermine or disrupt the attachment that they have with the other parent. And so keeping these in place and stable is better for the child overall because it maintains their access to both parents.
When it comes to that extended time that's being offered, another way I see that used to kind of really interfere with this parenting relationship, and when it's not fair, is when the parenting plan doesn't spell out how that is taken and really limit the ability of parents to stack their time. Because I've seen parents take a week of extended time and butt it up against regular parenting time and be able to really take a whole huge chunk of a kid's summer break, just utilizing those together. So I think that then we really run into something of who is it fair to? Because it's not fair to the other parent, and it's not fair to the child either.
And I think that's what's important. I would like to see more language around the court focused on this isn't fair to the child. We're ruining the child's access to the other parent. The child has the right to have a relationship with both parents, instead of this parent isn't getting enough parenting time.
We know that a good parenting plan will create stability for the child, but it should also reduce conflict. We know that conflict is bad for kids. This is well established. A moment ago, Michelle, you mentioned high conflict circumstances. The few things that we've mentioned over the past few minutes here with our presentation, we have maybe 2 different types of families and situations. You have, your typical situation where maybe we're not getting along, we're getting a divorce, but it wouldn't necessarily qualify as high conflict. But in a high conflict circumstance, we have individuals, families, parties involved that are aimed at weaponizing every tiny aspect they possibly can of this parenting plan. A high conflict individual or several high conflict individuals can't come together to work as a team. They can't prioritize the well-being of the child because they don't have the capacity to do so. They're more interested in winning. They're more interested in what they look like to everyone else. I have 50-50. And if you don't have 50-50, then there must be something wrong. So the reason why I want these things is because I want to have power control. I want to win. I want to be seen in a certain light. So now we have how many transitions a week we're doing? And in each one of those transitions is opportunity for conflict, manipulation. In a high conflict situation, we want to try to figure out a way that we can protect the child and reduce the conflict. Can anything be fair to anyone that falls into that category? Would they be satisfied with anything? It will be you win or you lose. So my question to you is, when we're discussing these things today, is there a big, huge difference between a high conflict circumstance versus your typical circumstance where people are generally able to function and make things happen? And if so, what would you advise? What kind of a different plan would we make? Because it is high conflict.
I have a comment on that because there's a difference between this high conflict situation, which may just be the circumstances of these parties are in a divorce and everything in their world is changing right now. And so there is a lot more conflict. And the type of high conflict that comes from having a high conflict personality involved. There's this communication thing that the court loves to use. I see a lot utilizing this BIF communication that comes from a guy named Bill Eddy, who's a social worker and also an attorney. But he has written extensively about high conflict personalities. And these are people who maybe have some underlying narcissistic traits, borderline personality disorder traits, like stuff like that. That is not really taken into account enough in the courts. A lot of times things are labeled as this is just high conflict. These people are high conflict. And really what we have is one high conflict personality in there. And I think that we really need to do a better job of examining what is really going on in this dynamic and what is the role that each party is playing, because both are playing some sort of role there. And if, one parent is really the root of that conflict, is it fair to the family unit as a whole? Is it fair to the other parent? Is it fair to that child, most importantly, if we prioritize that high conflict parent having 50-50 time, having shared decision-making? We don't look at that enough.
We don't pay enough attention to the fact that divorce is a high conflict situation, right? And right now, Melanie and I are developing a parallel parenting class. Like right now, we have mandatory co-parenting classes for parents going through divorce, but co-parenting doesn't happen until you're out of the high conflict situation, of which most divorces are, right? And so they need the skills to parallel parent in order to protect the children through the divorce and co-parent after. There are a select few, and I would even argue usually it's not a two-person situation. Usually it's a one person who's high conflict and another person who is under coercive control or is, reactively abusing, actually, who finally speaking up for themselves and is flabbergasted that they're the ones who's seen as the problem, right? They will be parallel parenting probably for the rest of it. And I agree, Melanie's spot on. We need to recognize this more often. We also need to recognize that I think the court and the people in the court are approaching these parenting plans as if they're writing them for the ideal situation in which parents are getting along or will get along soon after the divorce is final. And that sets parents up to fail when they're not taking into consideration the entire environment and what parents are capable of and not capable of. I would like to see the court make a move toward removing blame and judging, which is funny because there's a judge, but in removing blame and the competitiveness and just letting things be what they are. This is what it is. This is what it is. This is what's been stable in this child's life. How do we maintain that and set everybody up to win, right? And to that end, I'm glad Melanie brought up Beth. We recently developed our own model for communication for high conflict situations or for communicating with a high conflict individual that incorporates Beth, but is really focused on the communication styles that need to happen between parents who are divorcing or parallel parenting. The models either go toward intimacy, emotional intimacy, or they go toward strong boundaries. This kind of integrates all of that and teaching people the skills that they need in order to communicate in the way that protects their child's rights when parents are divorcing and are divorced.
So let's ask the question, what is the cost of fairness within this topic of parenting plans and schedules? What specifically is the cost? Is it well-being? Is it stability, emotional regulation?
Yes, yes, and yes. Children are learning that love is conditional. That's not, then they become people pleasers, or that, buzzword people are talking, fawning, right? They learn that their self-worth is in mediation or taking care of their parents, or they're completely neglected. Even if they get good enough, in those lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy, and their physical needs are met, their emotional needs aren't met. The instability leads to emotion dysregulation, and actually they are really at risk for, at best, long-term emotional difficulties related to anxiety that also correlates with depression.
I was thinking that one of the costs of fairness falls in line with something you just mentioned, which is that love is conditional. As a little subset to that is that relationships are transactional. I do this, you do this, we do this, they do this, and that when we do this, then they will do this. That relationships are transactions. And I think that sets them up for difficulties in future relationships as well.
I'll take it further and say that I think it's one of the worst things that a child can learn while they're developing emotionally for future relationships.
I would absolutely agree with that. And then here we come with the generational effects of these situations and patterns that repeat within families. How can family court empowerment coaching help someone with their parenting plan scheduling situations? I heard you talk about your parallel parenting course. How can you help parents that are in a situation where they're trying to figure out what would be best for the children within a parenting schedule?
One way is kind of educate parents on, here are things that I would typically see come up as a source of conflict in the future. So, kind of maybe pay attention to, give some sort of nod to that in your parenting plan. Don't just gloss over it. So, for example, that thing about stacking time for extended time, that might be something like that. Really looking at how some of these things might impact the child. So parent may be represented by an attorney in their divorce case, and that attorney may educate them a little bit on, hey, here we need to do this because we see these things come up as post-decree motions. We see this conflict. What Michelle and I can do is really go through, here's how some of these might actually impact your child's development or your relationship with your child over time. And then we also assist people with just even managing the communication with their co-parent during the divorce, during that high conflict situation, and really helping them with that.
And learning how to communicate with your attorney so that they see what you need and respond. Melanie does an awesome job of paying attention to detail and making sure that that parenting plan is pretty consistent. But also on top of that, developing the parenting skills and the emotion regulation skills in order to have it work best for you and protect the child's well-being while maintaining the integrity of the intent of the structure set up by that parenting plan.
The cost of fairness. Our next topic will be decision-making, shared decision-making, joint decision-making, and how that could affect the well-being of children. Melanie and Michelle, I want to thank you so much for presenting this material and being here for our clients and people that need more information about this. Again, Melanie and Michelle are with Family Court Empowerment Coaching. And thank you for watching or listening. Goodbye.